Hey everybody, this is Mac from Sylvana. I'm here today to run you through a little Salesforce Marketing Cloud demo. The use case we're solving for today is solving the problem of how an organization can support transactional emails across multiple different languages. So let's say you're an organization, you're multinational, you have customers around the world, and you want your transactional emails to hit customers' inboxes in the language that they speak natively. So think about your password resets, your order confirmations, shipping confirmations, etc. There's a few different ways to do this, but the best way to do it is to utilize some native Salesforce functionality that allows you to render dynamic content blocks. Contrast this to the more basic static content approach, where you basically set up a totally separate email and a totally separate process per language. That'll be more work to set up, it'll be more work to maintain, and it will also have some negative impacts on your reporting downstream. So looking over here at my diagram, this is basically how I would recommend not to do it. So this is the approach where you have a different email per language entirely. So to run you through, this is an order confirmation. Let's say a customer places an order. It goes to your transactional system of record, whether that's your ERP, your e-com platform, etc. Then it has to get passed through to Marketing Cloud in an API call. So if you have it set up as 4 different emails, I have English, Spanish, German, and French. If I have them as 4 separate emails entirely, that's 4 different endpoints I have to set up. So you have to have some service here at this first red circle that basically dictates, is this person placing this order from France? If so, let's send them to this French endpoint, and so on for German, Spanish, or English. In addition, on the Marketing Cloud side, you end up having 4 separate journeys you have to make. You have to make 4 separate pieces of content, 4 separate data extensions. And then after the emails are sent, say you have your ENS, your event notification service set up, you want to do some reporting. These are going to look like 4 entirely separate emails versus 1 email that's just available in 4 different languages. So this isn't the best for a few different reasons. I mean, first of all, you do have to have 4 different API call services you're managing. That's more work to set up. If something breaks down the line, you have to go fix it in 4 different places. It's going to be a lot more work for your developers there. On the Marketing Cloud side, again, you're setting up 4 different versions of the journey, data extension, and the content. And then I already mentioned on the reporting, it's just a little more work to basically have to unify those things. Ideally, we'd like to have it all as 1 email and be able to break out that reporting by language or by country as needed for your reporting needs. So contrast that to what we would recommend. This is the kind of dynamic content approach. So to walk through this one instead, same beginning, customer places order into your system of record. This time, it's only going to be a single endpoint per email, right? So for your order confirmation, you have 1 endpoint. For your password reset, you have 1 endpoint, and so on. You still have to make 4 different pieces of content. There's really no way around that, but you only make 1 data extension and 1 journey per email. And basically what happens is when the API call comes in, Marketing Cloud is smart enough to basically say, based on a certain attribute, call that country, I'm going to pick the English piece of content or the Spanish piece of content, and basically render that as you set it up and send that out. And then lastly, on the reporting piece, this will do what we were talking about before. It'll centralize all that reporting to one location per email. And then again, you can kind of split that out based on that country attribute as needed. So now I'm going to show you how this whole process works in Marketing Cloud. So jumping into Content Builder here, you can see we have 4 things. I actually cut French for this one, so just Spanish, German, and English. Sorry, France. And then we have 1 template-based email that kind of pulls all these things together. So I'll show you the English one for starters here. So you can see pretty straightforward order confirmation email here. Thank you for your order. A couple pieces of dynamic content right off the bat. We're pulling in the order number and the order date from the API call. We're also pulling in the link for this view your order, since everyone's order link is going to be different. This will take whatever attribute you pass in the API call, render it in the email, allowing it to be dynamic right off the bat without even getting into the language piece. I'll also point out there's a subject line, language specific on the top. So we have our English subject line up here. And then I'll show you the other ones quickly. Spanish here, we can see it's basically the same thing, but we have the Spanish subject line on top. But other than that, basically the same email. And German is essentially the same thing. One thing I'll call out here is we have this ID here. This is our content block ID. That's going to come in handy in a minute. So remember that 19042 for Spanish. So I'll jump out of here and I'll jump into our actual email itself. So this is how we basically tie all three of those language specific content blocks together. And we have some logic in here that will basically tell you which version of the email gets rendered. So it looks very simple. It doesn't look like a complete email, but the magic is all basically in this piece of code here. So what we're doing is we're basically looking at this country attribute that's going to be passed in through our API call. So what it's doing is it's basically saying if that country is ES for Spain, we're going to set this content ID variable to that number we looked at before, 19042. Same thing for if it's German, and then I also said basically anything else, we're going to set the English one. And what we're doing on the bottom here, this is what really makes the whole thing work, is we're using this content block by ID function. This is a out-of-the-box native Salesforce feature, so every Marketing Cloud instance will have this in here. What we're basically doing is we're saying render that content block we looked at before, and we're passing in the ID of that content block, which is what we set up here. You'll also notice that on top we have our subject line. This is pulling in that variable that we set in the content blocks. So if we pull in the Spanish one, it's going to pull in the Spanish subject line that we saw on the Spanish content block. All right, just to test everything out, make sure it's all working correctly, we're going to send some sample API calls in through Postman. So you have a pretty simple test here. You can see my country for this one is set as US, my order number 12345, and order date is June 25th. So I'll send that in. And then just for sample, I'll also send in a Spanish one. Let's change this order number to 98765 and update that date to June 30th. Of course, this would all be done by your kind of middleman service that's passing these through from your e-com system. We're just testing this here basically on Postman doing a manual call. So my emails came in. Here's the English version of the email. You can see that 12345 with June 25th as the date. Here's the Spanish one. Again, everything's in Spanish, the updated order number and order date here as well. So you can see this is a pretty powerful technology. This is just one of the many potential use cases for it, doing the languages. You could think probably multiple examples for any business that has transactional emails of how this could be used. So think if you have, say you're just US based, you have to have a legal disclaimer that varies state by state. You can render that dynamically. You want to have a different header image depending on a customer's affinity or brand affinity, something like that. You could do that dynamically as well. So super powerful tool. Great thing is all this stuff is out of the box. None of this is custom or add-ons. All this stuff is available right out of Marketing Cloud by default. So if you have any questions on this, feel free to reach out to me and let me know what you think. Thanks for tuning in.